How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Garage Built Baits. And I'm actually really sorry about how these podcast episodes are coming out because they're kind of random. They're a bit few and far in between right now. Hopefully, I don't know how consistent I want to get, but I want to be able to, I will be able to get some guests on. I do have some people lined up that I talked to that said they would be willing to come on to the podcast. Some really interesting guests lined up so far, but so on this gaming PC that I'm running on, the monitor does not have a webcam, so I want to buy a pretty decent webcam before I get going and all of that. But anyway, I digress. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Or if you, just touched the boom, oh my gosh. Or if you are new, welcome to the podcast. So, kind of a breakdown of what we're going to be talking about today is I'm just going to go over a little bit of how my fishing has been, and I've been doing some projects lately that I'm pretty excited about, touch into that a little bit, and then as well, I'm going to be going over some beginner lure making projects that you can get into for pretty cheap, and then also get into these lure making projects that are actually going to catch you fish, and then go over some kind of gimmicky ones in my opinion. But let's go over how my fishing has been. If you follow my main account on Instagram at Buyer Lure Co., or if you follow on YouTube, I've been doing a pretty decent job this spring. So I would say that we've only had ice out for a little over a month now up here in the Great White Tundra. And so right at ice out, it's been a lot of spring trout fishing. I was at Cabela's and I was walking down the trout aisle. I was like, oh, well, I need to pick up some different odds and ends that I would like in preparation for catching trout. And so I was looking and I seen these Berkley Ripple Shads, the 2-inch size, in rainbow trout pattern. And I was like, oh my sweet baby Jesus, these are gonna kill it. And maybe it was just me having that initial ton of confidence in the beginning, just being like, oh, these are gonna crush, because they've been crushing. And I've been trying not to overuse them and having my local fish get too used to them, but there was whole racks of them of different colors in that 2-inch size. And I'm like a lot of people out here, they're either fly fishing, or if they're ultralight fishing, they're using inline spinners, things of that, small spoons. The area that I'm in, I would say that a lot of the fishermen are kind of behind the times a little bit, because I rigged up that little 2-inch Ripple Shad. It's just a little soft plastic paddle tail. It's just 2 inches. And I rigged that up on a little ball head jig. I think it's a 1/16th size or 1/32. I think it's a 1/32nd size. And I just crushed on that thing. And the main thing with it is just finding what speed they wanted at that day. Because literally I'll cast it out, and as soon as it hits the water, I'll either slow roll it. That's been what's working best for me, is just slow rolling it, or just experimenting with my retrieve after that. But kind of going off a little tangent here, little sidebar. When I say that these people in my area are behind the times when it comes to fishing, I definitely mean it, because they're out, they are just either, they're either fly fishing. This is a huge trout area where I'm at, and and they're either doing that or they're throwing their spoons, beetle spins, inline spinners, whatever. And I mean, that stuff works. Obviously, it's like proven baits. But I'm just like, how is no one on this? Or, they're using power bait dough or eggs. Just things like that. But I don't think they're really on, like, I don't think people have really gotten on to, like, hey, like, maybe let's throw some finesse soft plastics to catch trout, like, or, anything like that. Or another really popular thing is, as the people around here will say, oh, yeah, we were catching them on plugs. Little original floating Rapalas, things like that. Just little, and not even the ultralight, not even like the ultralight Rapalas, just like the regular, just smaller size original floating minnow, or maybe even a Countdown. But yeah, that's mainly what people are using around here, and they'll just like, or they'll throw a hook and a bobber and a worm or a waxy or a minnow, and they just like sit in their one spot and they just like cast straight out from them. And people, they catch fish that way, but it's definitely not my style of fishing. No judgment from any of them. Or there's a little bit of judgment because I've been fucking the trout up, honestly, just on that little swim, and I've been really wanting to get into BFS gear because of this, because of the area that I'm in. But mainly, it's been a lot of trout this spring. Have not got my trout trifecta yet, which for this area, for me, that's rainbow, brook trout, and brown trout. And haven't really fished a ton of spots with brown trout in them. There's quite a few around me, but haven't really fished them. Like, there's like a little bit of drive to them. So right now I just have brook trout and brown trout. Not really including any of the other trout species in this, because like lake trout in my area, that's like, there's only two lakes around my area. This whole state, there's only two places to catch lake trout, and they're both, about like a half hour to 40-minute drive from me. But I don't include that. And then there's a couple places, or actually there's just like one lake that I know of that I've personally fished at, where they have a small stock number of cutthroat trout and then a small stock number of tiger trout. But I don't include those because not as widespread. They're more localized to just a couple lakes in my area. But anyway, moving on, I have been fishing the swim baits quite a bit. I've been fishing a Do It Molds crank blank glide bait. I think it's like 6 inches, and I painted that in a rainbow trout pattern. And so far, from 3 different bodies of water, I've caught 2 pike and 1 small dinky bass out of a pond. But I've gotten at one spot I got quite a few follows on it. Where I caught the bass at, I couldn't really tell because it was rainy. I couldn't really see what was going on with any follows or anything. But it has been warmer, so I think that bite will heat up a little bit, especially starting to throw that more, and bass more getting into pre-spawn and being more active. I did catch where I caught my first swim bait fish, which was a dinky pike. I also caught a bass out of there right away, and that was on a jerkbait blank that I painted in which one was that? Oh, it was a really simple. It was also a Do It crank blank, like 110 style jerkbait, and that one actually floats like really fast. Like it rises really like a lot faster than I prefer. But I just painted that in like a really simple like silver shad pattern. So it's just silver, white on bottom, has the kill dot, and then black on top. And this small bass just like T-boned it. And coincidentally, like that small bass was bigger than the bass that I caught on the 6-inch glide bait. But the bass bite is definitely going to heat up, because one of the lakes that I went to here recently, after throwing the glide bait quite a bit, haven't really thrown any other swim baits that I have yet, but just throwing that glide bait, I was like, okay, I want to switch it up. I actually want to like even catch small fish. That would be fine. And so I brought some of my conventional gear with me on a short little trip that we did out to the lake, and I hooked into a pretty decent bass. It was probably about like 2.5 pounds, and caught that. We were coming up on this area, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna fish down this bank. And then I haven't really fished that area before. I was like, all right, I'm gonna fish down this bank. I was like tied on a jig. I had a G2, a Black Dogs Baits G2 shell cracker tied onto my swim bait rod. A little bit overpowered, I think, for the shell cracker, especially with 20-pound fluoro. And then on my like over like all-purpose, like all-around rod, I had a Terminator Pro jig tied on. It's my like favorite jig to fish. I have a ton of confidence in it, and it has a Missile Baits D-Bomb trailer on it. Like after I got done, after like it got like tore up from like just Texas rig flipping it, I just took it off and I put it on, like cut it down a little bit and then put it on that jig, just add more bulk to it, and then like more surface area for that bass to like suck it in. And we were driving to this area, I was gonna work down the bank, and I seen a pine tree that had fallen. I don't know if it was like freshly fallen in there, but it was like over in the water, like branches in the water, things like that. And I was like, that is like flipping perfect. I was like, that is like the perfect setup to just like flip this jig in. And there was some tourists fishing the lake with their little push button rods that were from Texas, and I wasn't too far from them where this like laydown was. It was probably about 10 yards, and so I felt like a little bit bad for like kind of crowding them, but I was like, also this is like we're not fishing for the same fish. Like I don't know what they were using for lures or bait, but it's like we're not fishing for the same caliber of fish. And so I didn't really feel that bad, because they were just standing on the bank casting straight out from themselves, versus I seen this setup, this pine tree in the water with like all these submerged vegetation around it, like there's all these cattails and reeds, and I was like, this is perfect. And I told my partner, I was like, this is perfect. And a couple casts in there, and I pulled out that like 2.5 pounder and was just ecstatic. And then the next cast, like the skirt came off the jig, since I've used that one quite a bit. So I'll have to retie some skirting onto that. I'll have to go and order some or pick some up somewhere. And yeah, so far that's been like my spring fishing. Just some pike on the glide bait, a small bass, and a couple small bass, and then that like 2.5 one has been the biggest. And then probably like my biggest fish so far has been a pike I caught out of this big reservoir in my area. Rainy day, fished for like 5 to 6 hours and just had that one fish commit to it. I've had like other bass and huge trout like look at. Consequently, that's the one place that has the lake trout, and didn't have any lake trout look at it, but there's some huge rainbows looking at that glide bait, which is really cool. But anyway, let's get into some beginner lure projects. And first, I'm gonna go over some ones, in my opinion, that I think you should avoid these. Especially, like, I want to steer you in the right direction. I like want to put out good information to the best of my ability. And I don't want to steer you towards some of these projects that are, like, shitty, in my opinion. I just don't think they're going to be the best way to spend, like, your time, energy, and money. And don't get me wrong, these are fun. I've done a lot of these myself. But I'm going to try to steer you in a direction of, like, getting the most, like, bang for your buck and, like, creating the most effective lures that you can in order to be successful out of the water and, like, better utilize your time out on the water and having higher probabilities of catching fish. And so some projects that I think you should avoid. So right away when you, like, if you, like, search in Google or whatever, you search like beginner lure projects, or you search that into YouTube. I mean, Google and YouTube, one and the same. But you search for those projects of making like beginner lures, and you're gonna have like a handful of like common themes that pop up. So you're gonna have, and these are the ones to avoid. Like, I'm gonna give you this little list now. I would say avoid the stupid, like, bottle cap lures, like the beer bottle cap ones and stuff like that. I think they're, like, I've made them and they're kind of like a spoon, they're kind of like a jig, but have I caught bass on them? Yes, I've caught bass on them when they're, like, really fired up and easy to catch. At a local pond where they're easy to catch in, like, my area, or like my hometown area. And I just think there's, like, a lot better ways that you can, make lures. And I don't think those bottle cap lures are the way to go. Like, I've made them myself and they're just not the move. Secondly, I would say avoid anything where it's like making lures out of, like, cork. So a lot of times you're going to see, like, cork poppers and stuff like that, and I've fallen into this as well, where I made, like, a cork topwater frog, and honestly, that's not something that I'm gravitating towards when I'm going out on the water. Why? Because I don't think it's, like, a very effective lure. Like, it has a nice walking action, but am I going to reach for that? Or am I going to reach for like my Teckle frog or my Scum frog or my Booyah Pad Crasher? Like, I'm going to gravitate to those over, like, a cork popper. Or if it's like a popper, I'm gonna gravitate towards a pop R or a hula popper or literally any other popper out there, because yeah, whatever, it's something that you've made yourself, but there's better ways, like there's better lures out there to make starting off, and like more effective lures as well, in my opinion. And then you're gonna have like your projects where it's like making homemade spoons, and you're literally just cutting the handle off a spoon, and maybe you're making the handle into like a different kind of jigging spoon, like a Castmaster kind of a thing. And then, you're making that main spoon part, that bowl part, into, a regular swimming or jigging spoon. And it's like, yeah, I've done those too, and yeah, they work. Are they more effective than, the couple dollar spoon that you can, buy pretty much anywhere? I honestly don't think so. And then to get, like, right away, they're like fine, but they're just like, they don't have like the action that a regular spoon does, in my opinion. And so I don't think they're as effective. Have I caught dinky pike on them? Yes, but it's not something that I'm gravitating towards right away when I open up my box of like lures that I've made and stuff like that. It's not something that I'm gonna pick up right away. And then that's gonna be pretty much it. Those are like the top ones that you see pop up. And then kind of going off of that, whenever I see like a YouTube video where it's like lure making challenges, and it's like bigger YouTubers like doing it, and it's just kind of like just shitty stuff that they're just like hobbling together, and then go to these like ponds, and I'm sure they grind it out because it's probably hard to catch bass on something you've made. But it's like, I don't like, they're kind of unrealistic because you can do so much better. Like, I've seen one just doing like some like little searching for research for this video just to kind of see what's out there. And it's like hard, like Home Depot, like fishing challenge, and it's just like these shitty lures. And it's like, but you could do so much better than that. Like, if you're at Home Depot and you have like endless amounts of like supplies, like you could do something better. As far as like in that cheap lure realm, of like maybe ones to avoid, I would say like also just like like the paracord one, that one's kind of fun. That is like a fun one to do. Making a jig out of paracord, I've done that myself. I've done it myself, and you can catch fish on it. Caught some bluegill on the one that I did, but like I said, there's better options out there for you. So I'm just gonna kind of get into it right now. Some of like my top lures that you can make that are pretty cheap and relatively easy to make, and it's gonna be one of those things where like they'll just get better. Like the more you do it, the better it's gonna become. And me, I've been making lures for quite a while. I like to think that I started in I don't like to think, I'm saying that I've started making lures in 2015, 2016, that kind of area, and made like a lot of stupid stuff, just like trying stuff out, and that's part of the fun of it. But I've definitely wasted like a lot of time and money just kind of buying random stuff and just seeing like what'll happen. So there's like a lot of stupid stuff out there that I've made, and I have some of it. And yeah. Oh, so like recently, like I've been on my Buy Your Lure Co channel, I've been making a glide bait. And so I went out to go and test it, and it was just awful. It was so bad. And it's like, all right, well, there's a learning opportunity. I wasn't like a waste of time doing it, because like glide baits are harder to make. And so I was like, all right, it's a learning opportunity, but this is also going into that box of like lures. So, all right, but getting into this, some lure projects that I think you should start out with. And you can get into a lot of these for really cheap. Like, you don't have to spend a lot of time or money on them, and they're going to be effective. You're going to catch a fish on these, guarantee it. So I would say the first one to get into is you can buy the inline spinner kits at like wherever you want. You can buy them off Amazon. Like, there's a lot of different places that carry these kits, and they have like tons of different parts in them, and you can like make these inline spinners to exactly how you want them. And then you can go from there, kind of see what you like, what you don't like. Like, you can see like different blades, like what they do. And an inline spinner is probably one of the easiest lures to fish with, and probably one of the most effective lures out there. Like, that's why a lot of people like are still using it. That's why it's still a tool in my tackle box whenever, I mean, I have specific like scenarios that I use it for. But yeah, it's definitely effective. Like, I caught my first brown trout on a inline spinner out in the Rockies, so I was pretty jacked about that. And not on what I made, it was the Vibrax Blue Fox. Like, those inline spinners, those are something great that you can get into. You can customize them how you would like to. And then on top of it, you can even try to like dress up the treble hooks as well by doing either hair or, hair, fur, or feather. And those kits are something that you can do with your kids. You can do it with your family or whatever. And you can go out and actually like catch a fish right away, seemingly right away, on a proven effective lure that you made yourself, and like an easy one to make at that. It's literally just chunks of metal going into this build. So, pretty easy project to get into. And then these are actually the first lures that I started to make myself, and I started to make bucktail jigs, so and crappie jigs. So I went and I picked up some marabou feathers from, I think it was Shields, whenever we took a trip there. I lived really rural, so like going to a city that had a Shields was like a big deal. Like a 2-hour drive, kind of a big deal. And went to Shields, picked up some bucktail, and then you can go to Walmart or whatever. And at Walmart, you can you can go over to the sewing section, and you can pick up some sewing thread, some nylon sewing thread, and then you can, like, a spool is like pretty cheap. It's like $1 or $2, and you get a lot of it, like a lot that's gonna last you a long time. And then you go over to the fishing section and you just get some eagle claw jig heads, like the cheapest that you can get. You can get a variety of sizes. If you're making crappie jigs, obviously you're gonna go a little bit smaller. If you're making something like a little bit bigger, you can go with like a 1/4 ounce is a little bit bigger for a marabou jig. And then if you're doing bucktail, you can do like a 1/2 ounce jig, like ball head jig. My partner actually has her personal best bass in the fall time on a bucktail jig, like a half-ounce bucktail jig. And it's not like huge. She doesn't really fish a ton, so it's like 3 pounds, I think. Her PB smallmouth is a lot bigger. It's like 4 pounds. No scale for either one, but just eyeballing it. Like a 3-pound largie and a 4-pound smallie, and I'm really jealous because I have yet to catch a smallmouth, even though I'm in an area where there's a couple lakes with them in there, so we'll have to try to get after it. But yeah, get some marabou jigs. You can even go to Walmart and you can pick up like a synthetic wig, and you could make bucktails out of that because you can get those in a variety of color. Or you can go over to the crafting section and you can pick up feathers or whatever, and you can make, you can use those to make crappie jigs or whatever, and you can get the pipe cleaner, the Chanel like sticks or whatever. I use those for crappie jigs, and so when you like tie like a crappie jig, you put a little marabou feather on it, and I lock that down with the thread, and then I take one of those pipe cleaners and I'll wrap that around, and then boom, you got a little crappie jig. And my partner and I, we've caught a ton of fish on just like those little jigs that I've made because they're super effective. Crappie, perch, bluegill, white bass, small bass, walleye, freshwater clams, you name it, we've caught like every species under the sun with them. And then recently I've been tying bucktail jigs again, and I've been catching trout on them. It's just something a little more subtle for them, and they're a little bit bigger, but they'll catch all different sizes of trout. Today I caught 2 brook trout and 2 rainbow trout on these bucktail jigs that I've tied up literally today. I tied them up and then went out in the evening and caught fish on them. So something pretty effective. And you can play around with a lot of different colors. And so for like a bucktail jig though, you can go to you can go to like a fly tying store, or you can go to like a Shields or a Cabela's or a Bass Pro Shop, and sometimes they'll have like lure making stuff like that for like fly tying. So they'll have like fur, feather, and hide, and you can buy a bucktail. But better yet, if you're in an area where you have a lot of outdoors people, or you're outdoorsy yourself, you're around hunters, you can be like, you can ask them, hey, I would like, when you fill your tag, can you cut the tail off and throw it in a Ziploc bag for me so I can tie up some jigs with it? Fly tyers, they like the belly hair of deer that's longer and works really well. But I think, like, personally, that's like a lot more work for somebody, cutting out like squares of belly hair rather than just cutting a tail off for you and throwing in a Ziploc baggie. And then I'm going to be putting out a video here in the next coming weeks where I go over my process of breaking that down and like going through and getting it all prepared to like tie jigs up with. And then also, like with the video that I did today, I went out and caught these trout on bucktails that I tied up, and then before that I actually dyed the bucktail myself, so I go through like a really easy process for that I've done. So I'd say look out for those videos. It's just like a lot to cover. Like, I'm not trying to go over it into like too much detail, just because I don't want this podcast to be, like a couple hours long. And so after you tie up your bucktail, instead of or your crappie jigs or whatever, feathered trebles, whatever you want to do. After you do that, I would say there's a couple different adhesives that you can use that work really well. And so for me, one of the guys that ties flies at work, he uses clear coat nail polish. It's really cheap. You can go to the dollar store or Walmart or wherever, and get it for $1 or a couple bucks, and it already has a brush applicator for it, and so it's really easy to brush on. That liquid gets absorbed a bit into the thread, so it's going to lock it in, hold it really nice, and it's going to last you a while. And if you need to, and you can just reapply it. Doesn't matter. Or you can use super glue. I would stay away from gel super glues and just go for a liquid super glue. Personally, Loctite is my favorite. Where I like the thin one. And the problem with that is, though, if you over apply Loctite, or any super glue of that matter, you can get the white kind of powdery chalky look to it, and I just think that the clear coat nail polish leaves a nicer finish. But anyway, I feel like we went a ton into that, but it was fresh on my mind because I had just got done tying up some bucktails and have been processing these tails. I have one outside and I have one already done that I dyed the hair with. But anyway, be on the lookout for those videos. Those will be coming out in these next couple of weeks here on the Buyer Lubrico YouTube channel. I have to plug that in there a little bit. But then I would say, if you want to get into making baits from wood, I would suggest starting with balsa. And the reason that I say that is it's going to be one of the easiest to work with, because you can go to a hobby store or something, and or online, and you can order blocks of carving blocks of balsa, and you can pretty easily start to carve out lures. I would say starting out, maybe look at some doing a little jerk bait or a flat-sided crankbait, like a flat-sided square bill, something along those lines. And with balsa, since it is a softer wood, it's going to be really easy to carve. But I would suggest doing a line through design, because that's gonna, like a harness or something like that, because that's gonna be the strongest whole. That's gonna make your bait stronger. You can't use screw eyes for balsa. They're just going to pull right out. So a wire harness is going to be your best bet. And you can pick up some wire for pretty cheap at a hardware store. You don't have to have a super heavy gauge. Something that bends easily, but not too easily. I would say start in the 18 gauge range is going to be your best bet, especially if you're doing a smaller bait. And then for weighting, you can be really simple with that. You can just throw a couple of like split shot in there and cover up those holes with super glue and baking soda. That's going to be your most readily available filler, I guess. You can also use like a putty wood filler, or you can take some sawdust and sprinkle it back in and super glue it in. That's like really effective as well. But honestly, your best bet is that super glue and baking soda. It's gonna sand out pretty easily. You're gonna be left with a good project, and it's not buoyant. So when you say you cut a line slot on the bottom of your balsa bait, you're going to be able to fill that in with super glue and baking soda after you put your weights and your harness in and put your bill in. And then that's not going to affect like the buoyancy of your bait, because it's going to be like super glue and baking soda, that the result of that chemical reaction, like that material sinks. So it's going to just help with your balancing of the bait, if you will. And as far as like bills go, if you're making a light lure like that, you can't go wrong with using the little plastic inserts for like tackle trays. You can use those, and that's going to be a great starting point for you. They're pretty easy to cut out. They sand pretty nicely, and they are a thinner material, so you do have to worry about, if you hit it against a rock or a bridge or a dock or whatever, they have a chance of breaking, but they're pretty forgiving. And for sealing the bait after you have it all carved out and sanded, you can literally just seal the bait by giving it a super glue bath, and then just giving it a very light sanding with you can start with like 300 or 400 and give it a light sanding to make it smooth. And for painting, I would suggest you start with, maybe if you got some like brush style acrylic paints, that's a good place to start. You can just hand brush everything on, or you can use nail polish. That's pretty effective. And if you wanted to, you can even use a nail polish like clear coat as well. That's going to give you a fairly effective clear coat. You might have to like redo it after a couple of fish catches or something like that, but it's going to be fine. Like, the biggest thing is going to be functionality versus like look when you start making baits. Like, you just try to get like a good function out of them, and then you can worry about like the aesthetics of a bait later. Because I make baits right now, and they still, like, a lot of them look like trash. Like, they are like, they have good function, but they're just now starting to get like a more professional, like, better look. And part of that is just like continuing to invest in it, but right away, probably don't want to put a ton of money into it right away, and buy airbrushes and adhesive and paints and epoxies and whatever. Right away though, if you do want to have like a really nice clear coat, I would say at the hobby store or Walmart or wherever, get some brushes, and then just some like small like brushes, and then get some 2-part epoxy, and then you can do epoxy clear coats, and that's going to make your bait last a lot longer. And then I'll probably do like a little bit more advanced like podcast later of like going into like more adhesives and paints and whatever. But right now, yeah, I would say just start with balsa and copy a shape right away. But after that, just get fun, get creative with it. A lot of baits out there look the same, so maybe try to make something unique. And then if you can get it to function really well, it's even better. Like, there's no better feeling than catching a fish on a bait that you made. Like, my first swim bait fishes have been on a bait that I've painted, which is really cool. Now I have to make a bait and catch a swim bait or catch a swim bait fish on a bait that I've made. But all these catches have been on rods that I've made, which has been really cool. And that's one of them things where you dive deeper down the rabbit hole and you're like, well, I make these baits that catch fish. Now can I make a rod that is more suited to what I want? And so you just dive into this huge rabbit hole. But I would say start with those three. So start with inline spinner. You can't go wrong with that. It's a fish catcher. Bucktail jigs, crappie jigs, any kind of like hair or feather jig, you can't go wrong with, because those are fish catchers. And with those first two, you pretty much can't fish them wrong. You just kind of have to see what the fish are liking. And then I would say, if you're going to try to get into carving and everything, just use a box cutter or one of those snap knives and just start experimenting with balsa. It's going to be really easy to carve. You do have to worry about tearing out. You definitely want like a really sharp box cutter or whatever. You really want a really sharp blade, and just start and get a couple of variety packs of sandpaper and just start at a coarser grit and just work your way down. I worked my way down to 300. I think that's the point where you get like a pretty smooth finish, where you can sand it down to nice 300 grit. And you can even go further beyond that and get it to 600, which I'll start doing just to have more of a professional feel to everything. But that's going to be, when you start doing wood baits, that's going to be where the bulk of your time is spent, especially if you're making them by hand, is going to be sanding. But it's definitely worth it, because once you start painting, that's where you start to notice like some of your imperfections. And so I would say some good resources to start is, if you want to start out with those wood carvings, I would say check out Trey's art on YouTube. I would say check out Marling Baits, Solar Fall Baits. I would check out Zimtex is really good. And check out Buyer Lure Co. He's okay, I guess. And yeah, those are some good resources to get you started in the right direction. With Nate from Marling Baits, he does like a really good job of like showing stuff, but you kind of have to really pay attention to like get like little nuggets here and there of like really good information, or like really pay attention to what he's doing. But definitely some good places to get started. There's a lot of good videos out there of people like making baits. There's also a lot of bad videos out there of people making baits. So those are a couple like good ones to like check out right away. I definitely have like bad videos out there of making baits, but I'm hoping to up the quality of the baits that I make and the content which I'm showing you guys. Like, the bait making has slowed down like a ton, and like painting this fall has slowed down a ton this year, or this spring. It's slowed down a ton because I've been out fishing. Like, I had a comment on a video of the glide bait because it's like part 1, and somebody was like, shouldn't there be a part 2 already? And I'm like, well, you're right, but I've been, like, ever since I got iced out, I've been so excited to go fishing that I haven't really done any lure making, plus all the other different crazy aspects of my life. But I don't want to get sidetracked too much, so that's gonna do it for this episode. I hope it was informative. I could definitely talk a ton more about this, but I don't want a super crazy long episode for you to listen to. I just kind of want to point you in a direction and you can go from there. But I hope it was informative for people. There's some good nuggets of information out there, I felt like. But thank you so much for listening. If you want to rate this, you can rate this on whatever platform you're listening to. Definitely consider following, subscribing, whatever. That would be greatly appreciated. And I hope that you guys are having success out there on the water. And we will talk to you in the next episode.